So there was this huge press conference recently, and a massive claim was made. A new policy that's supposedly going to cause the single biggest drop in prescription drug prices in American history. Is this for real, or is it just talk? We're going to break down exactly what they announced. And there it is. That's the headline claim right from the top. The language couldn't be clearer. Not just a small price cut, but the largest in history. That's the huge promise we're going to be looking at today.
Here's how we'll walk through it. First, we're going to dig into that historic claim. Then, we'll look at the problem they say needs solving, what they're calling the American ripoff. After that, we'll get into the nitty-gritty of the policy itself, the most favored nation plan, see how a company named Regeneron plays a role, and then tie it all together with their broader economic strategy.
Okay, let's dive right in. What's the real story behind this so-called historic price cut? Well, the whole thing hinges on this, an agreement with 17 of the biggest pharmaceutical companies on the planet. According to the announcement, this group represents a staggering 80% of the branded drug market in the US. So the idea is, with that many major players on board, these price drops won't just be a few isolated cases. They'll be felt across the board.
But why is a policy this drastic even needed? Well, the speakers frame the problem as a decades-long injustice that they bluntly call the American ripoff. And this chart really paints the picture. The core of their argument is this huge imbalance in who's footing the bill for the drug industry's profits. They claim that even though Americans don't use the most drugs in the world, what they pay is responsible for the vast majority of the industry's total profits. And here are the numbers they use to back that up. Just think about this. The US has a little over 4% of the world's population, but it's apparently generating 75% of all pharma profits. So the question they kept asking was pretty simple. How is that fair? And they didn't just frame this as some economic issue. They called it a ripoff, plain and simple. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. even said this had been bothering him for 2 decades, which really positions this new policy as a long overdue fix to what they see as a major injustice.
So, if that's the problem, what exactly is the solution? It's a policy called Most Favored Nation.
The idea is actually pretty straightforward. It just means Americans should never pay more for medication than people in any other developed country. The policy forces these companies to give the US the lowest price they offer anywhere else. You can kind of think of it like a global price match guarantee for prescription drugs.
Now you might be wondering, how did they get everyone to agree to this? Well, according to Donald Trump, the key was threatening tariffs. The logic they laid out was that by threatening these tariffs, they forced other countries to stop, in their words, underpaying for drugs. This would raise the price everyone else pays, allowing the price for Americans to drop without totally crushing the drug companies.
And to show what this means in the real world, they gave some pretty dramatic examples. A popular weight loss drug, they said, would plummet from over $1,300 a month down to just under $200. A medication for COPD would go from almost $460 down to $50. I mean, these aren't small changes. If this holds true, it would be life-altering savings for millions of people. And this isn't just some abstract policy. There's a website for it, TrumpRx.gov. They presented it as a place where people can go to access these new, lower prices. And during the announcement, they claimed the site had already gotten 15 million visitors, which just goes to show how much people are desperate for lower drug costs.
But policy and numbers can be a little abstract. So to give this whole announcement a real emotional punch, the speakers focused in on the story of one company in particular, Regeneron. Regeneron, which is one of those 17 companies that signed on, became the main case study. The whole story centered on a brand new, groundbreaking gene therapy they developed that was described as a cure for a specific kind of deafness. And at the heart of the story was a little 2-year-old boy named Travis. According to the speakers, he was born 100% deaf, and he became one of the very first kids to get this new gene therapy. Travis's mom, Sierra, was actually there at the press conference, and she gave this incredibly emotional testimony. She talked about the life-changing moment her son could finally hear her voice for the first time. It was a really powerful way to show the human side of medical innovation. But here's the most unbelievable part of the whole story: the price. Regeneron promised to give this gene therapy to all eligible kids in the US for free, absolutely free. This was held up as the ultimate example of what this new kind of partnership could accomplish. Finally, it's important to know that this drug pricing plan wasn't announced in a vacuum. It was presented as just one piece of a much larger vision for America's economy and its healthcare system. They mentioned 3 other big initiatives. First, a major push to bring manufacturing for drugs and semiconductors back to the US, again using tariffs as the tool to make it happen.
Second, an executive order to reclassify medical marijuana to make it easier for scientists to research its potential benefits. And third, they talked about ongoing trade deals to make other countries, like the UK, pay what they called their fair share for drugs developed in America.
So when you put it all together, it's a really bold vision. It promises lower prices for us, continued profits for the innovators, and bringing critical manufacturing back home. It's a huge set of claims. The big question left hanging is, can a system that relies on tariff threats and voluntary agreements really deliver on such a massive promise to reshape American healthcare? I guess we'll have to wait and see.